If I added up all the money I've wasted on plant products that looked good, sounded clever or came highly recommended, I could probably buy a Monstera Albo. I bought the sprays, the sticks and the miracle powders. Some did nothing and some made things worse. And a few I still can't believe that anyone's recommending them. So today I'm showing you the popular products I'll never buy again and what actually works instead. No sugarcoating, just the honest truth from someone who's killed enough plants to know better. I caught the propagation bug a few years ago, and rooting hormone is one of those things that I bought early on thinking that it was going to change the game for me. Everyone online seemed to be using it, and the idea of speeding up root growth sounded like a no-brainer. You take your cutting, dip it into the magic powder, and boom, roots in no time, right? Except that's not really how it works, at least not in my experience. I stopped using rooting hormone a good few years ago and I haven't noticed a single difference. If anything, propagation has become easier and more relaxed without it. I've got hundreds of plants and I propagate all the time. Pothos, philodendrons, monsteras, hoyas, you name it. Not one of them has ever needed rooting hormone to root successfully. Some of my best propagations come from the simplest setups. Take these pothos cuttings I've got sitting in these cute little vases by Treleaf. No rooting hormone was used in the making of these, just water and time, and they're growing roots like nobody's business. Same goes for all the cuttings in my prop box. I've got perlite in there, a bit of humidity, and plenty of cuttings getting on with it. The thing is, most tropical plants are natural rooters. They've evolved to put out roots when a node touches something damp. It's built into their survival strategy. They don't need encouragement, they just need the right environment, some moisture, warmth, and a decent amount of light. Right, so Miracle-Gro isn't the devil, let's get that out of the way straight away. It's not some evil potion that kills everything it touches, but when it comes to houseplants, I've moved on. Miracle-Gro is like the fast food of fertilisers. It's cheap, easy to get, and gives your plants an instant hit. But long term, it's not really doing your plants any favours. That's because it's high in synthetic salts, which can build up in the soil over time, especially indoors where there's no rain to flush anything out. And unless you're being really precise, it's easy to overdo it. You think you're helping, but suddenly you've got brown tips, yellowing leaves, or a plant that just looks tired and stressed. One of the biggest issues I've found is how quickly it pushes out growth. Now this sounds absolutely marvellous, doesn't it? Until you realise that that new growth is often weak, thin and flimsy. And all that weak growth is basically an open invitation for pests. That's why I switched to something a little more low-key like Houseplant Focus. It's designed for slow, steady, healthy growth, like feeding your plant a proper meal and not a bag of crisps. My foliage got quicker, roots grew stronger, and most importantly, pests became less of a problem because the plant wasn't constantly stressed out or pushing out thin stems that can't defend themselves. I used to repot everything into those standard plastic nursery pots. They're cheap, lightweight, and get the job done. But there is something better. Once I started using clear pots, especially for plants like orchids or monsteras or anything in a chunky mix, I realised how much information I was missing. And once you get used to seeing what's going on inside the pot, going back to opaque feels like trying to grow plants blindfolded. I reckon most of us overwater before we underwater. And with opaque pots, it's a guessing game. Is the soil still damp halfway down? Are the roots healthy? Is there any mould? Well, who knows? You're relying on feel, weight and sticking your finger in, which is fine until it isn't. Now compare that to one of my plants in a clear plastic pot. I can see the condensation inside, I can see if the roots are plump or shrivelling up, I can tell if the mix is drying out or still soggy. That alone has saved more plants than I care to admit. I've still got tons of plants in opaque pots of course, but I'm slowly transitioning over whenever I need to repot. And to make things less ugly, I still always use nice decorative pots. So I went through a phase where almost all my decorative pots came from IKEA. You know the ones I'm sure. White or worse, grey, plastic, kinda shiny, and about £2 each. At the time they seemed perfect, cheap, simple and neutral. And what's not to love? Well, everything actually. After a while, I started to realise they didn't look good at all, especially if you're trying to sell the indoor jungle dream on the internet. They're fine if you've got one or two, but once you start to have more than say 5, it starts to look like a plant showroom designed by a budget robot. They somehow make even a healthy plant look a bit lifeless.
And yes, they're cheap, but that's the problem. They scratch and they crack and they stain and they really don't age well. It's that classic thing of buy cheap and buy twice, or in my case, buy 10 and replace them all a year later. Nowadays, I pick up ceramic pots from places like TK Maxx. You can get some really lovely ones too, glazed, textured, all different shapes and colours, and they don't cost the earth. Just look at this beauty. They actually make your plant feel like part of the decor, not just something you shoved in a pot because you had nowhere else to put it. I've bought my fair share of budget grow lights. Amazon has a whole bunch of course, and I used to have one in my old living room.
The prices sure are tempting. You see something that promises the full bells and whistles and for only £12 and you think, sure, why not? But what you tend to get is something with flimsy arms that won't stay in place, bulbs that burn out in a few weeks, and a light spectrum that seems to do absolutely nothing except make your room look like a dodgy nightclub.
I eventually realised that I was just wasting my money. These lights weren't helping my plants, they were barely keeping them alive. And that's when I switched to Sansi. I used their clip-on grow lights with the adjustable heads and they've been rock solid. The light output is strong, the spectrum actually does something, and the timer works exactly as it should. They cost more up front, yes, but I haven't had to replace a single one, and my plants thrive under them, not just survive. Fungus gnats, the eternal curse of indoor plant parents. I moan about them all the time, don't I? At one point, I was trying everything to get rid of them. Sticky traps, sand, cinnamon, drying out the soil, whispering threats, and yeah, hydrogen peroxide.
If you've ever Googled how to get rid of gnats, then hydrogen peroxide pops up constantly. The idea is that you dilute it with water, usually a 1:4 ratio, and pour it into the soil. It's meant to fizz and bubble, killing off gnat larvae on contact. Sounds good, right?
Well, it didn't work for me. Not only did the gnats not disappear, they seemed to get worse.
Maybe I didn't mix it right, or maybe the concentration was off, but instead of solving the problem, I ended up with irritated plants and gnats still flying into my tea. The problem is that fungus gnats don't just lay eggs once and give up. Even if you manage to knock out some larvae with hydrogen peroxide, the adults are still around laying more. And I swear they multiply out of spite.
The only thing that reliably works are tiny worms that you release to hunt and kill. Yeah, beneficial nematodes. Tiny little microscopic worms that go after the larvae like heat-seeking missiles.
I used them once, and within about a week, the number of gnats dropped dramatically. It was absolute bliss. I walked past my plants without being dive bombed. I could breathe near the soil without a gnat flying up my nose. But the truth is, even nematodes aren't a forever fix. You get a good stretch of peace, but gnats always find a way back. A new bag of soil, a freshly potted plant, a stray adult that flies in through the window, and it all starts again.
So now I don't aim to kill all gnats forever because that's just not realistic. I focus on managing them instead.
Keeping populations low, using well-draining soil, letting the top layer dry out, replacing sticky traps what I remember, and begrudgingly accepting that the occasional gnat is just part of indoor plant life.
For a long time, I used to tie up my floppy plants with good old basic twine. It's soft, natural, easy to get hold of, but for the last couple of years I've been using something far superior.
Now string is soft, sure, but once you tie a knot, it's fixed, and as your plant grows or shifts, that gentle tie can start cutting in. Now I've untied string from stems before and found that it's left a groove or even damaged the outer layer of the plant, especially if you tied it a bit too tight, which, let's be honest, happens more often than we'd like.
That's where Velcro plant ties are in a different league. They're soft and flexible, but more importantly, they're adjustable. You don't have to commit to a knot. If the plant puts on growth or leans a different way, you can peel off the Velcro, reposition it, and press it back down. No snipping, no faffing, and no damage to the stem. So how about those products that make your plants look too good, almost suspiciously perfect? I fell for it. I wanted my leaves to shine. I wanted that glossy, Instagram-worthy glow that says, this plant is thriving and I definitely have my life together.
So I picked up some leaf shine, gave it a shake, sprayed a few of my plants, stood back, and honestly, they look great. All the little dusty leaves turned into showroom models.
But something started to feel wrong. The leaves looked almost plastic. Dust clung to them more, water beaded and ran off in odd ways. They lost that natural velvety feel and just looked fake.
That's when I looked a bit closer at what was actually in the can, and it turns out most of these sprays work by coating your leaves in oil or wax. That's how you get the instant gloss.
But it also means your plant's pores get clogged, and those are kind of important. They're how plants breathe, release moisture and regulate themselves. Blot those up and you're suffocating your plant in a layer of fake sparkle. These days, if I want shiny leaves, I just use a damp cloth and a bit of patience, that's it. I don't even care if they're shiny or not anymore. I'd much rather have a happy plant with a bit of dust than one that looks like it's been laminated. I really tried to like core poles. I wanted to be that person with a big beautiful pothos climbing up this natural looking jungly support, but in reality, core poles look pretty grim.
They're scruffy and they shed absolutely everywhere, and half the time they lean over like they're just given up on life. Flimsy, boring and not even that useful. They're sold everywhere as a way to help plants climb and grow big mature leaves, but they don't actually do much.
Most of them are too dry for the roots to grab onto, and unless you're misting them constantly, area roots just hover around them confused. They might help a little with structure, but in terms of supporting healthy growth, I haven't really seen it. These days, I use proper supports like trellis trellises. I'm a big fan of their Zella products because it looks part of the decor and not something I'm trying to hide. They're sturdy, reusable, and best of all, the roots don't need to wrap around the pole, they just get on with growing. So I've tried a few pairs of traditional pruners over the years. These in particular I've bought more than once, and they feel solid and look the part, but every time the same thing happened. They got sticky.
Not straight away, but after a couple of weeks of regular use, they'd start catching. I'd be snipping a bit of dead growth or trimming a leggier plant back and they'd still stick shut. I cleaned them, oiled them, babied them, still sticky.
Nowadays I tend to stick to these. These are just a simple pair of scissors that I think I use to cut flowers and they've never let me down. No sticking, no seizing up, no need to clean them every 5 minutes, just smooth, sharp, reliable cutting, like slicing through butter. They're lightweight, easy to control for more delicate pruning, and perfect for the kind of regular snipping I do with my houseplants.
If you want to know all the mistakes I've made growing my plant collection so that you don't have to, watch this video next and I'll see you there.